Hello and welcome to the Car Care Not Reviews channel, and welcome to the 2023 Hyundai Palisade. Ever since the Hyundai Palisade came out, and equally, which is exactly the same thing, the Kia Telluride came out, everybody talks about them, how good they are and whatnot. So in today's video, we're going to find out how good the 2023 model of the Palisade is. We've been driving for a week. We're going to share with you our honest opinion. We're going to talk about some of the technical specifications. We're going to look at the outside, the inside, some things we like, some things we do not like, right after this. Let's start with our technical review under the hood, starting with the engine. Now, this does not have some small four-cylinder with a giant turbo. Doesn't have that. It actually has a proper V6. No turbo, no supercharger, nothing. Just a ginormous V6. When I say ginormous, it is a 3.8 liter V6, and most people will take that as a good thing. For the most part, it is, but there are a few things that are concerning here. Let's talk about them. This is designated as Lambda 2, or the more correct designation is G6DN, is what this engine is called. It's a 3.8 liter V6, all aluminum block, aluminum cylinder head, with a sea of plastic. Plastic valve covers, plastic oil filter housing, plastic intake plenum, which is not the end of the world, but you know, this engine is, how should I say this? The best way to say this is, this engine is old school. There's actually some technologies here that are very old. Most people will take that as good, but we'll talk about this a little bit later in the video, and you'll find out that perhaps that's not the best thing. This is direct injected only, so carbon buildup could be an issue with these, and there has been some reports of carbon buildups in the previous version or revisions of this engine, but this one too new to tell. Direct injected, you have the fuel pump right here, the high pressure fuel pump. Bank has a rail, and that's how you get direct injection. Other things in this engine that are interesting. So this engine has dual CVVT, or that's what Hyundai likes to call it, basically variable valve timing. Nothing really new, but what is strange is the intake side has a very cool setup. If you come on this side and look, this little actuator, that's what actually controls the oil control valve, changes the oil, where it goes, advanced, retard. But on the exhaust side, we don't have that. We just have passages and passages, and the valve is somewhere else, and we have all this mess. Don't know why we have just one on the intake and the other side is not the same, but that's what they went with. Now, a few things about this engine that are interesting. So this engine is used in multiple models, but in the Palisade and the Telluride equally. This engine is an Atkinson cycle only engine. Interesting, and it does have slightly higher compression than normal, which something leads to some issues. We talk about that in a little bit in the video. But otherwise, this engine is actually old school. There's not much to it. One downside that people potentially will see it as a downside, you have to remove the entire intake plenum to get to the rear spark plugs. Adds a little bit of cost to maintenance, but it's not the end of the world. Something interesting about this engine, and this is how you start seeing the old schoolness. If you look at the oil cap right here, it says 5W30. This is something from the yesteryears. This is not a common oil viscosity at all in the modern engines. You'll have 0W16. Pretty soon we're going to have 0W8. With this engine, nope, skips all that, 5W30. And this shows you its old schoolness. This engine is actually old school. I know direct injection, all that, but still, this is not a modern engine, believe it or not. Something interesting through observation, two things. First one is the coolant situation. So you have both radiator hoses going to this giant behemoth of a housing. You have the thermostat right here, and then you have the the other one going to the same thing, and it just connects to the engine. Pretty interesting. I haven't seen similar design in other cars. Usually you'll have the thermostat on one side and then the other hose on the other side, but this one goes to the same housing. Pretty interesting design. And something else that is small detail. If you look right here, this is a hook. This right here. That is a hook, and that hook is designed so you can hook up to it to remove the engine from this car. I don't remember the last car that I saw, a modern car, that has these hooks already on the engine. That is a very old school touch. You go into older cars, they had them, and here's the other one right here. So you basically hook up your chain across and you can pull this engine out. Interesting to see that in a 2023 model, but does leave us thinking about a few things. Now this engine has one more thing that is strange. This engine does not have hydraulic lifters. This has basically adjustable valve clearance. So when I started it in the morning on a very cold day, this is how it sounded like. And after hearing that, you're probably unnerved. But that's how engines with no hydraulic lifters are. You basically lose your valve clearance. They become too large when the engine is very, very cold, and then it quiets down. I don't know where they were going with this, because nobody misses adjustable valve clearances. Hydraulic lifters work very well. If you maintain the engine, they work very well. But they chose to keep the valve adjustments. Interesting choice there. And then we talk about the transmission, which is not a DCT, not a CVT, none of that. It's just 8-speed transmission. No real thrills about this transmission. Normal torque converter, basically everything is completely normal and a little bit on the old school side, because Hyundai loves to use DCTs in their modern cars. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad to see this transmission. It shifts super smooth, drives very well, doesn't have the hunting for gears. No, it's pretty smooth. But this transmission is made by a company called Hyundai Transys. And this is basically a company that Hyundai acquired that makes all their transmissions. So yeah, there might be some issues down the road, but we'll talk about that. You can kind of start to see the theme with the stuff under the hood, as we'll talk about a little bit later in the video. Let's take a look underneath the Hyundai Palisade. Let's start with the front. And you notice there's this giant opening, and that has to do with the exhaust. But the opening is a little bigger than we'd hoped for. But that's what they went with. Let's start with a few good things. Steel oil pan, not plastic, not aluminum. This is actually a good idea. It's not a bad one. But what is a bad idea is really hard to see, but if you come around and we look right in this area, right here, you see this plastic. This is actually the oil filter housing, and the oil filter where the housing mounts to. Oil and plastic never get along, especially, and coolant as well, but oil a lot more. This is not a good idea. The oil filter is always being serviced. Where the oil filter mounts to is being plastic. It's just asking for problems. I wish they would have kept that aluminum, maybe made this aluminum, that would have been fine, but they didn't do that, and this is a little bit of an issue. Looking at the suspension, I like that they have a separate ball joint from the control arm. If you're servicing the ball joint alone or the control arm, you don't have to replace both as a unit. This is good design. The knuckle is aluminum, which is something a lot of auto manufacturers are doing, trying to save some weight. McPherson strut setup, very simple. This is a front-wheel drive car, or started as a front-wheel drive car. McPherson strut setup, very simple, very long sway bar link. Very simple suspension in the front, which is good. Now, as we make our way back, there are a few things that are interesting. First thing is, the exhaust comes out here. Flex pipe is large here, but then we have another flex pipe here. This, every time you see a flex pipe, it was something missed during the design. 2 flex pipes is a bit much, and especially this one with front row seat. This will always be leaking in the future, so this is perhaps not the best idea. But then we look here, specifically right here, the exhaust. That is not a very high quality weld. I don't know what's going on there, but even the pipe itself is just not the highest quality materials underneath the car. See, inside things are nice, you'll see in a little bit, but here, not so much. And then we look at this very flimsy insulation. I mean, this is basically paper. This will get wet, this will fall off, and it no longer insulates anything, and then the heat from the catalytic converter will be transferred inside the cabin unnecessarily. Then we look here. There is absolutely no insulation in the middle, nothing. This adds to the car's overall road noise. They are covered here, but not in the middle section. Then the drive shaft goes all the way to the back, and they do not have U-joints. They actually have a flex disc, which is an interesting design. Look, it works, but this is one more maintenance item you have to add to your list. This is rubber, gets dry, rotten, and it starts cracking, and one more thing we gotta do. Interesting choice. Now we move in the back. This has somewhat of a clever all-wheel drive system. It can lock, and it can partially lock, and the transfer case is always sending power to the rear. And here's the differential. Differential is actually decent size differential, but this is what actually engages and disengages all-wheel drive. We look at the rear suspension. Things are interesting here because this design is a good design, multi-link suspension. The control arm is kind of skinny and long, but very tall. And then something that is completely abnormal. You look at this shock. For lack of a better word, this shock is enormous. I don't know why we need a shock this big, and I hope the price does not reflect it, but this is an enormous shock for a car of this size. I mean, beyond enormous. Let's put it this way. Now, this car does have single exhaust that exits on one side, has pretty nice tips for the design. And then when you look at this picture right here, this beautiful picture right here, spare tire underneath the car. Well, this is a good thing, because if you couldn't fit the spare tire inside, well, at least you have some kind of spare tire outside. Yes, it's a hassle to lower it and all that, and that's fine, but you have it in case you're in the middle of nowhere and you have a flat tire. You have a spare tire. It's nicely hidden away underneath the car. This is a good idea. Let's talk about the outside of the Hyundai Palisade. And the truth has to be said, this is a good-looking car. From every angle you look at it, it looks correct. It looks very SUV-like. And the overall shape is just a giant box. And this is what people want in an SUV. Every SUV that had a box shape did well. Every SUV that was swoopy and all that didn't do too well. Casing point right here. Let's start in the front. And the first thing I want to note, if you look at this from this angle, right here, if you look at it going this way, it looks exactly like a Range Rover. That's okay. You know, when you say a car looks like a Range Rover is a good-looking car. That's when the good ends in that part. It looks a lot like a Range Rover. And if you come in the front, I like what they did with the revision. So this is the facelift model. They were all swoopy lines with the headlights. They went angular. If you notice here, this is just an angle, line, angle. I like what they did. It actually looks really good. I truly think this car looks very striking, especially in this calligraphy trim. Looks pretty good. Headlights are pretty low, and this is something Hyundai loves to do lately, put the headlight really low. Good for visibility if you're driving behind somebody who's in a low car, because this headlight's not very high. But it's going to get covered with snow if you live in a snowy area, and it's too low to the ground. It's going to catch rocks. That's the only concern about it. Then you have these blocks that kind of carry over here, and you even have this little light that mimics them. I really like how this looks. And it just, if you look at the front end, it just comes and then comes down. It's just a box. And that's what people want. It looks really good. SUVs that are boxy, they look really good. Now, over here we have the radar sensor behind this panel, very low to the ground. I wish it was behind the emblem, a little bit higher off the ground, but Hyundai seems to like to do that a lot. Going around the side, things are basic. There is not a lot going on. They do have that double buckle where you have curve and then another curve. It gives it, from far away, it looks like it's wider than it is, but it actually is not. It is a flat profile. There's a very slight move out here, and that's it. On the side, there is not a whole lot going on. One thing to be noted, the mirrors are large. Pretty cool, because this is function over beauty, and I think in a car like this, you want big mirrors. Interesting, the turn signal is this shape. Pretty interesting and cool shape. I actually like it. It's something unique, not just another light at the corner like every other car. Then we move on to the door handles, which are, for lack of a better word, humongous. They're just very large, and they have this kind of matte chrome look. They look nice. They match the rest of the car, but they're enormous, and that's the thing. You can lock and unlock it from here, but you can't do that in the back, and that's the thing with the cars in this trim. Otherwise, when we go to the higher cars, like in case of Hyundai, when you go to a Genesis, this is when you're going to find stuff like that. But moving around the back, visibility is good. This pillar is a little bit on the wide side, but it had to be done this way. This is probably the only curve here. Good visibility in the back, except here. And then you notice the box. Look, we come here, and then it immediately turns and goes this way. There's not a lot of curves and turns and sweeping lines. No, it's just a box. I mean, it's a good thing. Looking at the back, you have Palisade written in huge lettering. Looks pretty good. I don't think it looks bad. And one thing, you have the hump when you look at it on the inside, and we actually do have a wiper here. Unlike the Tucson that we looked at, which had the hump and made absolutely no sense, this one actually has the wiper here. Now, this wiper could have been tucked away here, would have been nicer, but that's okay, not the end of the world. The rear view mirror camera is here. We'll talk about that when we go inside, but this is where that camera is, and that is separate from the rear view mirror, or the kind of the rear camera for when you put it in reverse, which is right here. I really like the look of this back. It is not over the top. They don't have a bar taillight, but in order to keep with fashion, and Hyundai seems to be very strong on fashion, they gave you a little reflector that goes across. So you can say, I have a bar of something. Don't know why they did that. Actually, that part does not match the rest of the car, but that's what they did. Overall, the exterior of this Palisade looks really good. Hyundai designs have been pretty wild lately. Some of them are good, some of them not so much. This one, however, it is not a wild design, but actually looks very, very nice. Truth have to be said, this is a very nice design. Boxy SUV, works very well design-wise. Let's take a look at the interior of the Hyundai Palisade, and I think this is where things go to the next level. Folks, this interior is really nice. I think this is where majority of the high price of the calligraphy really comes to shine. I mean, you spend $50,000 on a car, you get in it, it is this nice, you see where your money went. Let's start with the obvious stuff. The leather seats. These are not some just fake leather and just cheapo leather. This is Napa leather. It is super nice, super soft, very nice stitching, very nice pattern, especially when you look here at the back. Very nice patterns, and this looks really, really nice. And that same pattern is copied on the doors. Very, very nicely executed, very tasty, not over the top. It is just this whole interior looks completely different with this kind of leather in it. But it goes so much beyond that. For example, we look at the material of the headliner. It is suede. I mean, you will not find a car in this segment of the not luxury SUVs that has suede headliner, suede visors all the way across. The pillars are suede. I mean, this is not just some regular suede. This is soft suede. You can push it and it has like a cushion behind it. This is super nice. Now, some people will look at this gimmicky, but this is the kind of stuff when you pay high for a car, you want nicer materials, and this is extremely nice. I mean, I cannot stop touching the white headliner. I probably should because it's gonna get dirty very easily. And speaking of white, this color perhaps not the most family friendly color, but it is very nice to look at. It just lightens up the interior in a way that it looks really nice. And then we look here, we got some wood trim here. Looks really nice. It's really high quality actually, and it's really well executed. It does have a texture when you pass your hand over it. I mean, this interior looks and feels very, very high quality. Let's talk about a few highlights. Even though this is a futuristic car, we have a giant screen here. In the facelifted model, we have even a bigger screen. The basic functions are still just that, basic functions. If we look right here, we have a very large row of buttons. Cooled seats, heated steering wheel, heated seats for the passenger, cooled seats for the passenger. Super simple buttons. And something they did with the HVAC, which I actually like. They put a little screen here, which is black and white, not really color. And that's where your HVAC controls are. Pretty cool that they did that. I suppose it works because you can clearly see where your HVAC is at. You can change mode and whatnot. You can put the defrost and rear. It's kind of, they gave you some of the controls, but not everything, which is fine. I think that works. This is a good idea. Another thing that Hyundai has been doing, not exclusive to this, which I really like and I wish other manufacturers would follow, the auto setting on the HVAC has 3 levels. You can go level 1, which is low, medium, and high. This basically tells the computer how much airflow you want, because we've all gotten our cars and you hit auto and the air is just blasting in your face. Sometimes you're on a phone call, you just don't like that. Here you have an option to change it, and that is pretty cool. Another thing here in the middle, and I like how this car is not just show off, it is actually functional. Their design of the interior is functional. Your volume control is right here. You have shortcuts, hazard lights, seek for the passenger because you have it on the steering wheel. Favorite button, again, face towards the passenger. Setup, and then another knob to seek. Even though you have these, you still have the knob. That is cool. Now, the shifter situation, I don't like the button shifters or rotary dial. I like a good old school, but I suppose this works better than rotary dial. Right next to it, you have the auto hold. You have your drive mode select, which is a giant knob here. I wish this was smaller. It just looks out of place. Auto start off, which this does have it. And some other controls that are very clearly laid out. This is stuff you're going to use regularly. They're clearly laid out in a very nice fashion. You don't have to fumble through the screen for half an hour. I like that. But what I like the most is this little area right here. See, it doesn't just open. No, you push a little button and it just whirs away. Small little touches, folks. But something interesting about the cup holders. So the cup holders can be made to disappear. So you can have this entire storage and then you press the buttons and they aggressively come out to become the cup holders. This is perhaps, some people call it over-engineering, but I can see where they were heading with this, except this is a little bit on the flimsy side, so perhaps be a little gentle with these, because they might not be there after a while. But I like that you can hide these, and now you have more space. Again, they're thinking of function here over just cool and kind of this cool design that they pop out. No, this is functional, because sometimes you just want to store stuff. Right next to it is your charger for the wireless charger for the phone. Plenty of space here. Again, this is a functional interior, not just a random show-off interior. Underneath the center console, you have this storage area right here, which is also a nice touch. Now, we don't focus a lot in this channel on infotainment screens and how well they work, but I'll give you a gist. This infotainment screen, it's a nice color, big screen, nice colors, somewhat responsive, but the system is a little on the slow side. Plenty of customizations. You can basically customize every single option in the car, but it is a little bit on the slow side, especially on startup. The gauge is also another giant screen, which I don't like screens because they serve absolutely no purpose. Other than, which is not exclusive to this, every time you put your turn signal, it gives you like a picture of your blind spot, which is nice. But otherwise, there is absolutely no customization. You can't put your map here. And this is the problem with this cars in this segment. They're not luxury cars, so you're not going to have these high-end features. Yet we have a giant screen that does nothing. I wish it was just the regular gauges and save us a few bucks here on the price. But that's what they did. This is nothing exclusive to this. You'll find the same gauge in every single Hyundai model almost. There is one thing that we have to highlight about this car. The seat adjustability. I mean, you will not find this kind of seat adjustability even in some luxury SUVs. If you look here, it doesn't look like there's a lot of buttons, but there actually is. So you can do the regular adjustments, up, down, front, up, down, back. That's normal. But then we go here. This part extends. If you're tall, this is a big deal. But then if you go here, this actually adjusts the bolsters. You see the bolsters moving? If you like a huggy seat, or you like a flat seat, like me. This is very cool. And the lumbar support, not only you have lumbar support, but you can actually adjust the height of the lumbar support. So you can really fine tune it. You will not find a lot of cars in this segment that really have this level of adjustability, and that is a huge plus. If you're tall, you're going to like this. If you had a bad back like me, you're going to appreciate that you can raise and lower the lumbar support, not just bring it out or back. This is really cool. Let's talk about the back seat. The back seat in this car, especially in the calligraphy trim, is a very, very nice place to be, actually. So this is my seating position. I'm 5'7", just to give you reference. I have a lot of room, and this still has a third row seat. Headroom, pretty good. The thing about this car, the opening for the door is very wide. And actually, if you look at the door, it's a pretty long door. This makes for easy exit and entry, but it goes beyond that. Let's talk about one thing that is not very nice here, and then we'll move on to the next nice things. We talked about the very nice Napa leather, and then we have this giant plastic cover behind the seat because they did not want to wrap the whole seat with Napa leather. It's where they cut costs a little bit, not the end of the world, but they did. But you still have the little storage here. But what is impressive about this back seat, and this is actually somewhat rare in this segment, you're not going to find a lot of cars like this in this segment. Heated rear seats, HVAC controls here, that is nothing exclusive. But what is? Cooled rear seats. I don't see a lot of cars in this segment with that, and that is really cool to have, at least available as an option. Maybe most trims won't have it, people won't buy it, but if you wanted it, it is available as an option, and it is a very nice option once you've gotten used to it. But it goes beyond that. See, they thought of little things. They did not put the USB charger, like ports right here. They actually have a standard household socket here, and then an old school cigarette lighter, 12 volt. But then they put the USB stuff right here on the seat. Pretty cool space. I mean, look at it. It's right here. That's very cool location for it. It's hidden, it's not in your way, but nonetheless, it is there. But there's one more thing that I think, this is kind of a gimmick, but there's one thing that is important. See, this model has captain chairs. There's a model without the captain chairs, but this one has captain chairs. But if you still want to fold the seat, let's say somebody doesn't want to climb in the middle, they want to go back. Normally you have to pull the seat forward and do this manually, But in the Palisade, you have two buttons. If you're tall, you press it here. If you're short, you press it here like a kid. So if my kid does this, the seat automatically moves. This is very smart. This is actually something I see my kids doing. Yes, you do have to do this when you're done, but you can just press a button. There goes the seat. And the third row seat has room for 3 people and not cramped. This is nice. This is well engineered. You can actually sit 3 adults in the back. You're not going to drive them 8-9 hours trip, but if you need to, you can actually sit adults in the back because there is enough room, and there is enough room in the center console, in the second row, and there is enough room in the front. This is really nice. I really think this is a very functional interior, and it goes beyond that. If we go to the back door, which is of course power operated. See, most cars that have a power operated third row seat, which by the way this one does in the calligraphy trim, you have to press and hold the buttons for the third row to come down. Something I like about this one, you could just and walk away. There is a small safety concern with this if there's somebody there and you press them by mistake, but still, for the most part, it is nice to just press the button, walk away, and it'll fold down completely. But wait, there is more. They also have buttons that mimic what we did in the front, and they'll fold the second row seats. That is pretty cool. Now, they don't come back up, but still, if you want to load something, you could just press it, and thing will come down, and life is good. Wait, there is one more thing on the third row that is pretty impressive. See, most cars in this segment barely have heated seats in the back. This has heated and cooled second row seats and heated third row seats. If you look all the way over here, there are 3 buttons. One of them is a heated seats. But wait, our third row passengers are very important in the Palisade. So these 2 buttons actually change the backrest of the third row to your liking. Not a lot of cars have this feature. They really thought of this, folks, and this is really good. And the best thing is the third row seat not only has 1 setting, it has actually 3 settings, just like the front. They really thought of this, and this is really functional, especially if you live in the winter time. This is really cool. Let's talk about some things that I do not like about the Hyundai Palisade. And it starts with the powertrain. See, the problem with the powertrain here is a word I kept repeating: old school, old school, old school. See, when we go talk about a company like Toyota or Honda, old school is good because everybody says they came down with quality, their old school stuff were better. But when we go with Hyundai to old school, that's when we enter the dark period of Hyundai's history when they first came out. Things were not good. They've come a long way since that. But when I start seeing old school touches in an old school engine, that comes from that dark period, and that's a problem. I mean, it is unbelievable that we have a car in 2023 that just got revised with no hydraulic lifters. Basically, the engine will be clattering away in the morning when it's really cold until it warms up. That's the first problem. The second problem is this engine, in its previous revisions or versions, did have issues with carbon buildup. And did they do anything about it? Not exactly. We still have direct injection only, and hopefully they did something to help the carbon buildup, but it is a very high likelihood. And that's a problem. And the other thing with this engine is it is a high compression equals high heat engine. So heat is always going to be a problem with this car. So if you live in a cold climate, you're going to have to listen to the scary clattering engine until it warms up. But if you live in a hot climate, you really have to be on top of the cooling system because this engine just loves to generate gobbles of heat. That's just how it's designed. So these problems combined with a 8-speed transmission that is also a little bit on the old school side from the same company that made many transmissions that had issues, does raise some concerns on longevity of this car. When you buy it new, it's great, but longevity is a problem. But hey, Hyundai has America's best warranty of 10 years. That's fine. At least you have that. But buying this car second market when that warranty is gone, it's going to be a problem. So that's a reality of the powertrain. But let's move past the powertrain. This car is extremely impressive as a family car. From a build quality, at least the fit and finish of things, from the way the interior is designed, and they really did a good job on that interior, especially in this calligraphy trim. But there is one small elephant in the room. You drive this around town, it's beautiful, beautiful place to be in, nice visibility, nice looks, very nice features. But you go on the highway and that immediately goes out the window because it is extremely loud on highway drives. I mean, they literally took the budget, cut the budget for the insulation in half and put it on the interior because it is super loud at highway drives. And this is not something you expect in a car that has Napa leather and suede headliner. It just kind of falls out of character very quickly. And then there is the skimping. We talked about the back of the seat not having leather all around. It's fine, not the end of the world. But then the mirrors. You know, mirrors have been on cars for a very long time. You fold them, they get out of your way, so when you walk in your garage, if you have two cars, you don't accidentally bump into them. And there was a point where mirrors were fixed. You could not move them. That was horrible. But then come cars that cost $50,000, and they usually have something called automatic folding mirrors. Shut off the car, the mirror folds on its own. Beautiful. Well, the 2023 $50,000 plus Palisade doesn't even have that as an option. There is no folding mirrors. Much lower cost cars have automatic folding mirrors. This one, skip that altogether. So that I see the skimping, and this is the little stuff I noticed in a week. If we start really tearing into this car, we're going to find a lot of areas that have skimping like this to make this nice interior. I wonder. So what is the final verdict on the 2023 Hyundai Palisade? Let's talk about the good stuff. This is a really well-engineered SUV from a functionality perspective. The inside is a very nice place to be, but in addition to that, even if you buy the lower trims, it's well designed. The space is used very intelligently. You have plenty of space in the front, plenty of space in the second row seat, and even better space in the back. And the best thing is you have an 8-passenger or a 7-passenger version. This is a 7-passenger version with the captain chairs. You do have an option for an 8-passenger. I like that the third row has space for 3 and 3 potential adults, not only little children. This is really well executed, really well made. The looks are good and they do not interfere with the function. But where this car becomes kind of a sad dream is in the question mark that lives under the hood. The powertrain, even though it performs very well in a test drive, it's smooth, it's not really very loud, the transmission shifts very well, but longevity is a question mark. So I see this car as the perfect family car if you're the kind of person that switches cars up to 10 years and you move on. Or you're the kind of person that do not take long road trips, because what good is the warranty if something happens and you're stranded waiting for a dealer, whatnot? This is the problem. I wish, and this is going to be something I will say that will make a lot of people wonder. I wish they had a different powertrain. Look, I love the V6 here, but this V6, I have some concerns with longevity-wise. Same thing with that transmission. I wish they would have put a better powertrain in this, even their hybrid powertrain. As not good as that is, but this is a concern. So very good SUV, not so good from the reliability and longevity aspect, powertrain. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some other videos. And until the next video, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.